for this panel. I think it will be very interesting to hear the papers from Boris Abramovic and Esther Fuoco, because I think that they will resonate a lot with the keynote we just had listened to. So this panel's title is Post-Human Subjectivities. And we will have two papers about this question of the uncanny and the otherness in different way from on stage. So let's start with Boris Abramovic, who is, I will take just 1 second. Boris is now a visiting researcher at Relate, a research laboratory for art and technology at Aalborg University, but he is also a curator and a cultural worker based between Montenegro and Denmark. And his research interest is media art with a focus on the aesthetics of robotic art, including the processes of production, technologies, and modes of reception. His communications title is Performing Robots, the Uncanny and the Otherness. Please, Boris, you can start.
Thank you so much, Erika, and I would like to express my gratitude to the Limits of the Human Symposium and to everyone involved in preparation and in each aspects needed to make this moment happen. Also, thank you for including me in this symposium and in this discussion. Thanks also for presenting my short bio. Indeed, I am a researcher at Relate Laboratory for Arts and Technology. Meanwhile, recently, since few weeks ago, I'm also slowly transferring to Vienna because I started my new position at University of Vienna. So it will, for now, it's not only between Montenegro and Denmark, but between Denmark and Austria. So my new project that I'm working here is about social robotics, but I will incorporate many aspects of artistic robots with the view of staying with the research area that I have been committed for the previous at least couple of years. So many thanks. I will just open my slides and of course go for the share screen option if I manage to do that. I don't know if I'm already sharing the screen, or I should have, sorry, maybe I should have
not yet.
Oh, I will just need to do that. So apologies to everyone for this small technical question.
Okay, it's working. We can see your screen.
Okay, now you can see my screen. So,
but not your presentation.
Oh, but now the presentation is there.
Not the presentation.
Oh.
We are seeing your Finder. I don't know, your
can you
files.
You can only see me and not the presentation.
No, we see your screen, but you know the Finder, the list of your files.
Where you choose to which screen you wanted to share, you share the Finder window and not the presentation window.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do another screen sharing, another one, and choose the right program.
Mm-hmm. So I will. Oh, okay. maybe now you can see what I'm attempting to. Is my presentation now on?
No.
Oh, sorry about that. I will just stop sharing and start sharing again.
Do you see the different options where you can share?
Unfortunately, oh, maybe I can try like this. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we are there. Sorry for the technical problem. Performing robots, the uncanny otherness and disability. During my work, focus on impairment and disability emerged in the work itself. I will try to explain how and why. In this particular research, I'm trying to combine the uncanny theory, the robotic performers, and critical disability studies. I am opening and discussing the questions: how does the uncanny operate with performing robots that exhibit features of disability, vulnerability, and weakness? How do impairment and difference in robots, rather than being a barrier for interaction, trigger emotions and potentially enhance a more effective interaction? What aesthetics and political features define the impairment type of uncanny in robotic performers? To discuss the uncanny, I singled out three most important works. First one is Ernst Jentsch, psychologist, on the psychology of the uncanny, possibly the first essay that discussed the uncanny in terms of automation, in terms of health, physical and intellectual uncertainties and doubt. Famous Sigmund Freud's essay followed, and Freud's essay was essentially a critique of Jentsch's essay. Freud's uncanny discussed something that we can maybe define as emotional reaction or emotional responses towards certain objects and phenomena. And it was focused on uncanny as interspace between the strange and the familiar. Then Masahiro Mori's the uncanny valley, which in many ways, after being translated, popularized the idea of the uncanny and the uncanny valley, especially in terms of not only in terms of robotic research or social robotics, but also as well in line with contemporary arts and of course robotic arts. Mori's approach was somewhat different. Of course, it was based on the automation which was initially suggested by Jentsch in terms of uncanny. But Mori's approach, as we all know, was realism-based and was focused on graph and the line between affinity and eerie sensation. The more robots would be human-like, they would come closer to the point of the eeriness. There was, Mori defined a certain line where that he advised designers to think about when they are designing robots, so that they wouldn't be as human-like. So my focus, my interest is in this particular essay, in this particular research, is mostly on Jentsch, on the psychology of uncanny essay. Why? Because Jentsch, in his essay, essentially discussing what the uncanny is, was focused on of course, on the uncanniness of automata, but also regarded and viewed a healthy, normative human as opposed to uncanny sensation that can emerge. So Jent was discussing a physical illness as well as mental illness in relation to uncanny feelings and sensations that we can feel and experience. And his essay was largely based on the idea of disturbance of physical harmony that a perfect man, a perfect human can have. Particularly relevant and particularly interesting in this context of uncanny, of the idea of the concept of the uncanny in relation to health, disability, impairment, care, vulnerability, would be Jent's idea of particular conditions that he was discussed in his essay, specifically epilepsy. Epileptic seizure for Jent is in fact a perfect example of the uncanny for those who are watching, who are witnessing the epileptic seizure of another person. And in particular, it connects to the idea of uncanniness of automata, because a person who is experiencing the epilepsy is somewhat instantiating this line between automating human and humanizing the machine. In Jent's opinion, hysteria as a mental condition wouldn't be as uncanny, because a person experiencing or going through a hysterical seizure in fact retains consciousness during the seizure, whereas in epilepsy the person doesn't retain consciousness, which is, according to Jent, a primary element of the uncanny. Further, I go to discuss and introduce in my essay critical disability studies, mainly through the work of Magris Schildrich, critical disability studies scholar. CDS empathically cannot be sidelined then as primarily the concern of those with disabilities. Insofar as each of us, however we are embodied, is complicit in the construction and maintenance of normative assumptions. It challenges every one of us to rethink the relations between disabled and non-disabled designations, not just ethically, as has long been the demand, but ontologically, right in the heart of the whole question of self and other. Given the introduction of these elements that I have introduced to my research and that I'm working on, I have selected the three examples of robotic work. The first of robotic work that that is instantiated precisely by the idea of impairment, disability, vulnerability. The first of these works is the blind robot. The blind robot, an uncanny sense of empathy. Blind Robot by Canadian artist Louis-Philippe Demers draws on blindness to trigger empathy and stimulate audience member to form an emotional connection with the robot, as explicated by the artist. The robot has two industrial movable arms with human-like hands that he uses for touching the face of the person sitting across from him, much like a blind person might do when recognizing an object through a sense of touch. The blindness and how it is manifested through physical contact are the most important elements of interaction with the blind robot, leading to personalization and extending an uncanny sense of awareness in participants, who may, through this encounter, feel closeness and empathy towards robot, which was the goal of the artist. Difference, weakness, and vulnerability as embodied by the blind robot elicit an uncanny tendency to empathize with and connect with the robot, revealing the possibilities afforded within the context of able-disabled binary, using an art-led methodology in human-robot interaction. This mode of interaction highlights how performed impairment, rather than being a barrier, can alternately foster the rise of emotions, empathy, and bonding. This is the image of encounter of the blind robot and audience member. Another piece, another robotic art in theatrical context piece that I'm exploring in this research are Bill Warren's Hysterical Machines. Hysterical machines, like the blind robot, explore the interaction potential in performed impairment, disability, and weakness. But instead of focusing on physical impairment, these machines draw on mental health disorder known as hysteria. Each machine is a spider-like robotic object consisting of a spherical metal body and 8 aluminum legs that are powered by motor hydraulic automation as well as control systems. The machines hang from the gallery ceiling in a suspended condition until they detect the presence of human in the room through built-in sensors, at which point they activate and reach out to the audience, simulating hysteria through a series of inarticulate convulsive motions. According to the artist, the aim of this robotic performance is to evoke empathy in visitors. So the same aim as with the blind robot. The emotional impulses that may arise in an encounter with these machines blend the uncanny anxieties and tendency to empathize with robots. This is a close-up of hysterical machines. Finally, the third example that I'm looking into through this research is Norman White's helpless robot. It performs mobility impairment as another type of disability. The helpless robot is a 6-foot-tall, non-anthropomorphic robot with a uniquely shaped cylindrical body made of plywood and connected by the iron bars to a rotational platform. The artist created helpless robots through his research of the role of emotions in human-machine interactions, as he was seeking to develop a type of artistic testbed for experimenting with artificial emotion. The helpless robot uses electronic speech to make contact with gallery visitors, asking them to help with its rotation and movements, and therefore potentially causing empathy and compassion. The interaction extends to physical contact, engaging visitors into assistance and care. But as the visitors comes to robot's aid, instead of expressing gratitude, the robot suddenly becomes more demanding and loud, asking for more help and instructing the audience how to rotate him back and forth, making them feel mistreated. Pleasant and meaningful interaction therefore turns into an act of betrayal, causing uncanny tensions in the participant. After presenting these works, I will just briefly present some aspects of the discussion that is of the research that I'm working on based on these robots, based on these artistic robots in theatrical context. The potential for an uncanny sense of empathy is here explored in comparison of blindness, which is used in blind robots, and hysteria, which is used in Bill Warren's Hysterical Machines. The cultural imaginary of blindness includes curiosity, empathy, and affiliation for the blind, which may explain the blind robot's high interaction potential. Unlike some other forms of impairment, such as mental illnesses, which are widely stigmatized, many cultures attribute profound mystique and magical powers to the blind, intrigued with the idea that sight may be replaced by other senses, which is a concept that reaches back to antiquity. In ancient Greece, although blindness was regarded as ultimate misfortune and a punishment, the blind were believed to hold spiritual and prophetic powers. Comparing this feature that blind robot has, and also considering Bill Warren's Hysterical Machine in comparison, considering stigma and discrimination associated with mental health disorders, the condition of hysteria exhibited by Bill Warren's robots may be less likely to inspire high degrees of empathy, affinity, or emotional connections, and more likely to trigger eerie sensations, fears, and anxieties, which are, so to speak, on another pole of the uncanny sensations that humans can experience in contact and the communication with robots. Another important aspect that I am exploring in this research is the question of trust. How do we trust the uncanny? And equally important, betrayal of trust. When humans interact with technology, especially when it involves physical contact or physicality, the issue of trust indeed becomes a critical one. For example, interaction that happens with the blind robot requires users or participants, in this case, the audience members, to allow a robot to touch their face with its technological hands. And the face is what we perceive as the most fragile and identity-carrying the part of the human body. There are no assurances in this type of uncanny interaction whether the experience will be pleasant and meaningful, or if it might turn into somewhat harmful or dangerous experience. What audience members who participate in the artistic project of blind robots may question is how the robot is really programmed and which type of hand gestures the robot could or may apply to their faces. Even if the underlying programming would be harmless and fully secure, is the robot really capable to deliver its programming successfully in terms of possible malfunctions that can happen in the process? The question of trust and the question of betrayal of trust is, in this research, viewed through the examples of the blind robot, where we have the example of successful interaction, which implies higher level of trust. And the helpless robot, where we have the example of betrayal of trust, as the interaction starts with as meaningful and pleasant, where participants or audience members are in the position to provide assistance and care for the helpless robot. Whereas the robot turns into unethical act of being very demanding, loud, and manipulative of the participants, which represents an act of betrayal of trust. Uncanny, persuasive technology, and ethics is another question very relevant for the discussion. The emergence of uncanny emotions also implies a certain level of emotional safety. One of the questions is how this emotional safety and how the ethical concerns are viewed and discussed in terms of social robotics versus how they are considered in terms of artistic projects, art robots, performing artistic robots. Certainly, social robotics in terms of ethical concerns has strict and clear implications, whereas it turns, or it appears that with artistic robots, the possibilities are wider for artists, for their conceptions, and for the performing robots, even when it comes to betrayal of trust. Deception, illusion, and imaginary, which are drawing together fantasy and real, are informed by the uncanny and by these particular three examples of artistic robots that I had an opportunity to present today. For that reason, I would like to thank you, Erika, and also Esther, each of the participants for following through my presentation, and I would like to ask you to be free to continue this discussion with any comments that would be helpful for my research, and any questions that I might be asked to answer now or later. I'm not 100% sure when is the time for a discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Boris. We will proceed as follow. We can have a short timing now for questions about contents, very specific questions we would like to ask Boris about his communication, and then we will have the opportunity to a broader discussion during the forum. That's the idea of our organization of these panels. And so I will ask if yes, we have a question, because we have I think it's very related to what Jennifer was talking about, the fact that we need to find new relationships in the failing, and it was really interesting to see. So please, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Boris. Really interesting. I'm very fascinated by these examples. Just a quick question: Are you gathering data from the people who have experienced these robots to calculate their responses, or are you doing it from your own sense of what you think people might feel?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for the comment and for the question. I am relying mostly on actually on what artists singled out as the goal of their project. So for each of them, I have from artists articles and texts what was their main goal, and that is in each of the three projects, it's empathy. Whereas in Blind Robot, to say so, on the top of empathy, it's also forming an emotional connection from human towards robot. Thanks to work also with my supervisor, Elizabeth Joachim, I have also insights in some data when it comes to Blind Robot. I have insights in data of the actual reaction, but not for all three examples.
Oh, thank you so much, and please say hello to Elizabeth for me. She's a good friend. I just wanted to agree with you that I felt that maybe empathy would not be the experience that I had if I was experiencing the hysterical robots, because so I thought it was good that you pointed out that maybe even though they want empathy, they may not be achieving that. I don't know. So thank you for your insights on that.
Thank you so much.
Do we have other questions? Yes, Louise.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Boris. And actually, just to start with, just to pick up what Jen was saying, the hysterical machines, I was just going, oh, I'm not sure I would be feeling terribly empathetic towards these spider-like scary creatures. So I'd love to ask more about that, but maybe in the forum, Boris. It's really fascinating work. I love the fact, and I'm struck by the fact that you're drawing together the uncanny with empathy, with disability studies. I think that's really striking for me and important. And I'd just like to hear a bit more, if you've got anything more to say, about touch and empathy and the uncanny, because if I reflect on some of the uncanny moments that I've experienced when watching performing robots, so for example, Geminoid F, and then also I'm going to talk about robot tomorrow, Muon, they relate to touch, moments of touch, when a human touches the robot. And for me, the kind of illusion of what's going on breaks down at that point in really interesting ways. And it's like the robot resists the humanistic kind of narrative. But for you, what you're in these examples, the aim is actually through that to get to empathy. So I'm really interested by that. And I just wonder if you can talk any more to those relationships.
Thank you so much, Louise. Actually, it's extremely important and interesting point. Yes, I understand, of course, your standpoint that touch could actually break the illusion. It could break the deception. Whereas in these examples, maybe perhaps because of the blind robot is actually engaging in subtle, delicate touch. Literally, the technological hands, which are mainly teleoperated, I have to add, or in some parts at least, use the fingertips for this kind of delicate facial touching. For those reasons that you mentioned, I also spoke about the trusting the uncanny, as there needs to be a certain trust. We as participants, or those who participate in these projects, are not aware even of the programming, even though they are informed or sign the consent. But what if the robot performs in malfunction? So therefore, yes, touch as an element which is extraordinary and extremely important from the aspect of physicality, can, as you said, maybe break an illusion, but perhaps with the right artistic robot or with the right artistic piece, it can extend towards empathy or even emotional connection, which was the aim of the artist who created the blind robot. So I think it's a big topic and a very good point that I will consider further in my research. This edgy line, actually, when the physicality is part of the process.
Yeah, I think it's really intriguing.
It is.
That relationship.
Thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope we will continue the discussion in the forum. And now I will have to give the microphone and the screen to Esther Fuoco. So Esther Fuoco is a doctor in digital humanities and performing arts from University of Genoa and Université Sorbonne Paris-Cité, and her research and published writings deal with contemporary performing arts, aesthetics of digital performance, and applied theater. She teaches at the University of Genoa, of Milan, and other institutions of Lausanne as well. But I want just to point out from her bios that she had a postdoc fellowship in an institute of biorobotics at the Sant'Anna School in Pisa. So she just had a research project, a very recent research project about robotics. And her communication title is The Other Seen by Itself, Post-Human Aesthetics in Rimini Protokol's Uncanny Valley.
So thank you, Erika. And first of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for their hard work and commitment. I try to share my presentation. Okay, could you see that? Okay, perfect. So what I would like to present today in the short time available is a branching research itinerary of sort with a versatile methodological dynamic that at times may appear schizophrenic, but that deals with a lot of key concepts such as authenticity, rejection, individuality or singularity, human being, degree of freedom, and so trying to stimulate reflections on how weak and at the same time powerful can the confrontation appear on a stage between human and robot. To do so, the tools commonly used for an epistemological or ontological examination of the hybridization between performance and technology, or in our specific case, performance and robotics, are no longer sufficient, in my opinion. Let's start with what Steve Dixon remarks in his last books. Existentialist philosophy highlights that while we are each alone, separate and free, we are also contingent and relational. Thus, Jean-Paul Sartre urges that first and foremost, we consider ourselves in relation to other people and in terms of being for others. I now switch from a digital performance expert to Karen Barad, a well-known American feminist theorist and philosopher, who also speaks of posthumanism using some assumption of quantum physics. I refer to her theory of agential realism, for which the universe comprises phenomena that are deontological, I quote, deontological inseparability of intra-agent, end of quote, and non-interactive agencies. Intra-action is a neologism introduced by Barad. For Barad, phenomena or objects do not precede their interaction. Rather, objects emerge through particular intra-actions. Thus, the devices that produce phenomena are not assemblages of humans and non-humans, as in actor network theory. Rather, they are the condition of possibility of humans and non-humans, not simply as ideational concepts, but in their materiality. So, in a case of a performance that integrates the non-human, the robot, the android, into its process, as we will see, we can say that an intra-action and an entanglement phenomenon is created, like a spooky action at distance. I chose the well-known Rimini Protokoll's Uncanny Valley, much discussed in the performance studies field, and not a show by Orise Rata, because it was staged by a single non-human actor. There is no interaction between human and artificial actors, neither between humanoid robots as seen in the photos. We have a robot playing the part of a human, looking like a human, and addressing the audience through a monologue, with its double simultaneously playing on video. This performance provides the cue to argue how contemporary theater, in its exasperated experimentation, has attempted to express the consideration of a human in terms of processuality as a becoming, a changing entity that can only be provisionally defined on the basis of its relations with the other, so as to make the post-human body exhibited or absent appear as a new stage in the ongoing process of cultural hybridization, as a new frontier of our complex relationship with the world. A theater on the edge, devoid of the human, which paradoxically enhances the importance of its presence, in this case embodied by the audience. This corresponds to a perfect phenomenon of abhumanism, the philosophical thought originated by Udiberti in 1955, which was subsequently assimilated into the more complex theory linked to posthumanism. Isn't it perhaps disruptive to see how this cultural trend, this social posture, also invading a field of art such as the theater, a spectacle that is by its very nature linked to, produced and staged by a human being? A capital and Kafkaesque question to ask would be, to whom does this theater speak? To whom do the characters speak? Let's to the performance of Rimini Protokoll. A human character, a well-known German writer, is presented on a stage through a video and replicated by an android, a humanoid robot whose exposed circuitry on the back of its head shows the audience that it's actually a fake and not a real actor. Sitting in a corner on the stage, the animatronic double begins to present what he announces to be a conference on instability and inner instability. Talking about his human life, he confesses how he has sometimes felt outside his body, like an external observer of himself. How authentic are your memories? To overcome my own panic, I act like a machine, he or it said. He reflects with the public on what a mass media phenomenon can cause, an individual discomfort in relating to the public, never in the first person, but always mediated, to the point of believing that the authenticity of one's own person is in that image of oneself that is transmitted. And it goes on. How are you right here, right now? And how do you feel having sat here and listened to me? If you have come to see an actor, you are in the wrong place. But if you have come to see the authentic, you are also in the wrong place. Because I don't want to expose myself, not as the real thing, the real person. Because look, the stage alerts everything to an unbearable degree. The android recounts with ironic strokes the life of the scientist Alan Turing, known as one of the pioneers of the study of computer logic, and as one of the first scientists to take an interest in the subject of artificial intelligence. The robotic actor continues, are humans not numbers of algorithms that must necessarily position themselves in order to relate to others? Aren't machines capable of being perfect compared to humans? Or is it simply that there is no concept of error because everything is linked to cause and effect? As a Frankenstein, towards the middle of the performance, the robot begins to show films and photos of its creation. As it assembles its being from the silicon cast of Melle's face or the 3D reconstruction of the various limbs. That's things which, looking at the audience, begins to ask, you find me uncanny? I have no idea who you are, but do you know, maybe something about me offend you. A tiny off-key voice takes over the scene. The material comes to life and undermines mass pre-recorded voice, creating a disturbing effect. Terms such zombie, alienation, aversion follow one another in his speech. And it is in fact in this dramaturgical suspension that the voice addresses the audience, telling the story of Masahiro Mori and the well-known theory of the Uncanny Valley. I will say something really closely related to the previous presentation of Boris. Mori described not entirely linear relationship between the resemblance of an automaton to a human being and the sense of familiarity, and therefore empathy, that it arises. As my colleague said before, this empathy, in fact, increases as the resemblance to a human being increases. But when the resemblance begins to appear excessive, it undergoes an abrupt collapse, veering towards the opposite reaction, a perturbing effect due to the impossibility of understanding, because of the extreme realism, whether the automaton is actually such, rather than a living being. So robots, which are increasingly anthropomorphic, arouse unease and disorientation, but perhaps they are not born from our desire of immortality or assisted longevity, or even of divine omnipotence, capable of creation, Indeed, the vision of the android that is explicitly expressed in the final part of the performance is that of a fallible machine, whose control is still, despite its sophisticated human appearance, in human hands. A machine that has its weakness, bugs, and a sort of technological singularity. We could really talk for hours about this human need to confront one's own mortality and one's own limits that leads to generate even such types of performance. And ask, what's left of the theater, an anthropomorphic art for excellence, in a performance like this, with the act by a single android? I would say that the collective experience of sharing, the enjoyment of the show, the aesthetic, synesthetic, and empathic dimension of what we feel in relation to what the human person seated next to us, in front of us or behind of us, feels or doesn't feel. What happens to the concept of being for others, closely related to the theatrical world, if we only have an android on stage? It's a good question. It's a part of my research and my paper. I'm wondering, will the term communication will be replaced by that of connection? Or does the mere hypothesis of artificial life and of the robot as its symbol invading the theatrical stage lay the foundations for an opposite ontological condition based on separation, estrangement, or incommunicability? These are reflections arising from the boundary that the non-human on stage at the sole protagonist like this can trigger. So, thank you.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a bad manipulation. Thank you very much, Esther. Also for your timing, it was perfect. Let's see if there are some questions about, yes, Jennifer, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Esther. That was fascinating. I'm very intrigued at how the two papers work together in terms of this one having the content of bipolarity, you know, working with a kind of alternate brain composition. And I think that's a really interesting connection between them. But what I was interested in knowing and thinking a little bit more about is, especially in your final question, where you're talking about what is theater if it's just the robot on stage, but what do you make of the fact that the actual living person is on the screen a considerable amount of the time? I don't know how much, but what about that exchange? Because that is the live, not live, but the actual human. And I just wondered what you thought of that exchange between the screened human and then the live robot, but also the moment when the human undergoes the transformation to try to build the face, that you show a little bit of the pulling off of the face, but that process of making the version of himself, I found very compelling in a way, and I didn't know what to make of that exactly, and I just wondered what you thought of that process and the integration with the living actor on the screen. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, thank you for your observation and question, because I catch the mean. I find the most interesting part of this performance that it was very frustrated for me in the audience to see an actor pre-programmed with the voice pre-recorded, to see a performance that during 1 hour like this. But the most interesting part was the exchange between the image, the pre-recorded video of Thomas Melle. It was not an improvisation or a real exchange, but it was a pre-recorded, a very precise rhythm of dialogue but I was wondering about this second self, the image of this second self, because at a certain point, the image of the real Thomas speak to his double, to his android, about the sense of agency, a sense of synthetic agency, a sense of control, because he said, if I plugged off your electricity battery, you are only a machine. So if you will have a bug, I'm the controller. And he stared about this machine. And at the moment, this very weird android look weak and in his fragility. And I think there is a sort of technological singularity, because he looks like a person to be different in a sort of way. And then I also wonder about the state of identity, because we live every day, like today, with a mediated image of us. So I look at me in this screen, it's something very rhizomatic. And I think at Deleuze definition, this is Deleuze, a rhizomatic image. So it's a very tricky point that I will develop in my paper. So thank you. I don't know if I answered, but
yeah, thank you very much for that.
Okay.
I don't know any other questions, and I have one in the same direction. You were saying that you felt a little bit frustrated during the performance, I mean, in Rimini Protokoll creations, the construction, the staging of the address of the expert to the audience is extremely important. I mean, they don't work with actors, they are experts of the daily life, and they put them in condition to talk to the audience, to express, to share their experience to the audience. And what about the setting they choose this time? And it's interesting, it's connected to bipolarity with dissociation, so they dissociated their expert. And as a member of the audience, do you did you feel concerned by the writer's story? Did you feel that there was an address to you or not? Or did you feel completely exterior, I don't know, just watching but not being with the expert?
So I totally understand what you mean, because I felt very in a strange way, because I didn't feel any empathy and this kind of embodiment that I usually feel in theater. Because although the voice was the original voice of the writer pre-recorded, when the machines started to talk about his life, his psychological disease, I hear this story, these biographical details through a machine with a pre-recorded voice. So at a certain point, the android look at the public, at the audience, and address a question. And I was really keen to answer this question. And then I realized that it was a pre-recorded voice, and I was disturbed by that, because he asked me, what do you think at this moment? So usually I'm interacting in Rimini Protokoll performances, and I was really ready to answer. I'm not shy, but after 20 seconds, he continues to speak. So I was frustrated because, okay, it's pre-recorded. Although in Ulisse Errata play, there is an actress in real time that gives her voice to the android. Here, the mechanism the story on the screen and the voice were pre-recorded, created something frustrated and that in a sort of way make hard to feel something empathic or something at all. I was also disturbing when the audience make applause at the end, because I said, but there is no actor, no human. So for me, it was a show, a robotic show. But it's an experimentation, really interesting, performative in experimentation. So.
Thank you. I don't know, is there any other question or comments? No? So, I don't know.
If we have got time, I just think to ask to Boris what he think about affordance, the design of the machine to be accepted by human, or if it's something that you developed in your research. Because when I worked at the Biorobotics Institute in Sant'Anna, is one of the things that I was very questioning about, the affordance, how the shape can make friendly and the acceptability for the user, no? Because I see that the arm is a mechanical arm, the blind robot doesn't look like a human arm. So what do you think about the affordance of robot?
Thank you, Esther, for a fascinating presentation about indeed very, I can say, current and very intriguing work. Affordance is surely an important aspect of what we are researching. My work hasn't been, in fact, so much focused on human-like robots. For a reason that I cannot elaborate on. My focus was mainly going towards the behaviors, and this is how this is what brought me also to starting, and I have to say I'm at the very beginning of researching robots who exhibit certain form of weakness or even impairment. So when it comes to human, I would say perhaps for a broader audience, human likeness would be something that more effectively leads either to interaction or uncanny or other types of emotion, whether that can be affiliation or eerie sensation or combination of all these things, which uncanny apparently might be. Whereas for robotic artists, for curators, researchers, and all of us in the field, I don't think that the appearance and design itself, it's still very, very relevant. Whereas I think that even in Miele's case, the character of the android is what gave me the uncanny sensation. Even in my case, personally, he could have been even less anthropomorphic in that sense. Whereas I also like the hint that the engineers and designers gave us in terms of the back of his head being only part which is fully mechanical. I really appreciated that detail.
Maybe we've got time during the forum to exchange, because I've got a little bit, an opinion a little bit different, but yes, we haven't got time.
We unfortunately,
thank you, Boris.
Unfortunately, we need to leave now the room, because we need to make space for the other room and virtual room. And so let's meet in 10 minutes in the forum. And I think which is the main link, the link of the main space. But in the Excel file, everything was really detailed. So see you later. Okay, and let's continue there. Bye.